Welcome to the Tech and Accent podcast.
Here you learn about being an expat, working abroad, technology, and more from no-native English speakers. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Tech and Accent podcast. I'm your host Walmyr, and today I'm here with Hubert. Hey Hubert, how are you doing?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me, Walmyr.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of working with Hubert during the time I worked at Typeform. So Hubert, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, the companies you have passed by, and what you're doing at the moment.
Cool, yeah, thank you. So I'm Hubert, I'm French, I think you can hear it, and it's part of the discussion. I actually studied in France, but actually quickly my career drove me in Switzerland and then in the UK where I worked for Amazon. Amazon was actually the first company where I was a manager on day one. Before that, my career was mostly me being wanted to be in a cave coding happily with requirements and no one bothering me, but I was dragged most of the time into more leadership position. And so Amazon was for me like, okay, let's try to be that on day one and become the manager on the spot. And then I spent 10 years in the UK, and I worked for bigger and bigger companies and teams. I mean, Amazon was probably the biggest, but then I worked for Sky, for Marks and Spencer, so very different industries. And 3 years ago, when you and me, we started working together, actually, I wouldn't say it was a midlife crisis, but I felt that maybe less is more. And so smaller teams, more agile companies. I was really curious about the SaaS industry. So I joined Typeform. And actually now I'm working for a different SaaS, but I've realized that yes, less is more indeed. And I'm working for a company called Verif. Verif is trying to solve a very interesting problem where I guess it's more and more important. The digital part of our life is bigger and bigger, but it's also harder and harder to trust what's going on in this part of our lives because we don't see people, we don't connect with people the same way. It's very easy to do fraud as well online because, even when you show your passport, if it's a passport physically, like you can get a lot of clues, but if you just upload a picture of a passport, like then it's much harder to decide if it's so. That's what Verif does. It does identity verification, which requires also a lot of AI, which is kind of cool, but it's also product-led, which for me, what drove me to Typeform in the first place, to be honest with you, and it's become really an important part of what I'm looking for in a company. And I'm SVP of engineering at Typeform, so I lead all the engineering teams, and I work really closely with the product team, and just get this feedback loop wheel to spin as fast as we can to kind of address more and more use cases and grow the company. That's it.
Cool. That's really cool. It's nice that you realize that less is more. I like the idea of having this journey. Like I imagine that passing by Amazon should have been nice, but at the same time, I imagine that it's probably a very stressful environment because of being one of the big companies, right?
Yeah, it was really interesting, Amazon, in this regard, because I still learn today about my time at Amazon. Like I'm still decomposing a bit the company to say like why was it scaling so well. But the stress element. So if on one side, I have to say, I think there are many Amazons, like people who have been through it, have been through different parts, and there is different vibes I think you get from it. I wouldn't say I felt there was pressure or anything like this coming from management or anything like this, but there is something that's so interesting at Amazon is the sheer size of the company create this kind of massive, roller coaster, and you don't want to be the one team that's blocking this machine, right? So that there is kind of almost organic pressure that's really interesting. And really nice. I was receiving 800 emails a day. So, wow. this is it. So during my holidays, I would show it to my wife. I would activate notification on my phone for emails, which you don't have normally, because and then you could see my mobile phone dancing on the table. I was just receiving a ton of stuff. So, staying abreast this massive machine moving forward was probably where some of the stress was coming from. But once you understand you can survive that, you actually feel better and stronger. Like I got much more efficient on few things. But it took me 8 months, to settle in the role. And before I was in consultancy, where we expect people to deliver value in 2 weeks max. So for me to be 6 months in the role and be like, I'm still figuring this thing out, I felt really bad for a while, yes.
Yeah. So, Hubert, could you tell a little bit? So you mentioned you were from France, you passed by the UK. So where are you located at the moment and how you got there?
Oh, yeah. So I'm in Spain now. I'm in Barcelona. How I got there, it's a bit like Switzerland and the UK, if I'm honest. It's a bit that adventure is calling me here and I just accept it. This time it was a bit different, if I'm honest. So after 10 years in the UK, and one thing I didn't tell you, which actually is noteworthy, I have 6 children. So a big part of my life is to be this dad that can scale his family. And there was one challenge to scaling the family in the UK. My second child, she has Down syndrome. And in the UK, we had a fantastic support both on education and health from the country. But passing the milestone of secondary school, that became much more difficult for me to find a good plan for my daughter with education. And so we tried a couple of things. It didn't work so well. And so one trigger for us to be in Spain, if I'm honest, is yes, I was really attracted by the Typeform role and adventure, but also as a family, we needed to find a plan B for my daughter, and UK didn't seem to have a solution. So the reason why I'm in Spain today is a combination of job opportunities that was enabling a new chapter in the family adventure, because in Barcelona you have a lot of support and a lot of even charities to support children with special needs, and that was the trigger for us to say yes, this is where we should be.
Oh, that's interesting to know. And since you have 6 children, the next question I have for you is, what are your hobbies and what do you do outside of work that brings joy in your life? I imagine you don't have that much time to spend on hobbies, but if you could
but we do actually. It's so it's quite an interesting part of my life. I don't feel that actually you have to, that there is a zero-sum game with your time, right? So let me give you some examples. Of course,
I'm saying that because at the time I worked at GitLab, and I used to talk with people that had lots of children. I would say, what do you do on your spare time? And they said, I don't have any spare time,
No, I do get this, but I'm trying to debunk that view of the world that, I don't know, that your family adventure should actually remove your personal adventure from your personal adventure or whatever. Of course, there are trade-offs you do, but so... And clearly, one thing that brings a lot of joy in my life is to spend time with my family, right? And so one thing we started doing as a family is camping. So on one side, I think it's very basic, and I think that's what I like with it. Like you almost go back to the basics of life.
Yeah.
But, because right now we have also 3 children that are below 4, plus my
I would
other
ask
child.
you how old are them?
So they are 14, 13, 10, 4, 3 and 1. And so with my child with Down syndrome, she has limited mobility, knee problems. And then the last 3 that are fairly young still, we can't, I would love to take my family on a cycling trip or hiking and stuff, but this is not what we can do right now. So camping maximize the adventure without having us to be on the move, even preparing a meal suddenly becomes an interesting endeavor. And so that's one thing. The other thing that we've started also as a family is taekwondo. I'm really surprised myself, but it's a huge success. We have where I live, there is a vice champion in lightweight category of taekwondo. So I felt like, wow, there is a famous person in my little village next to Barcelona, I should check it out. And so we went with the whole family for a discovery session. We liked it. We had a family council to decide, okay, if we're going for taekwondo, we need to commit for at least a year. Are we all in? Yes. And then we went, and yesterday actually 2 of my children got their naranja cinturón, the orange belt. So I had a big surge of pride. Thank you. And so that's one thing. For the rest, if I'm honest, it's less planned. But what's really important to me and even to the family is friendship. So in Barcelona, it was really quick for us to make tons of friends, friends of entire families, or even. So I do spend a lot of time with friends from Typeform as well, that I can catch up on regularly. And for the rest, I try to read. And actually, I try to read more fiction because I've been reading non-fiction for 10 years, and I feel that even my imagination and mental health needs to, to have some recreative time and to.
I feel the same. I feel the same. This year, I kind of got back to reading fiction because I was so used to reading just about work and technology and that kind of stuff. And this year, I started reading, and as well to practice my Spanish, my reading in Spanish. I bought some fictions in Spanish, which is kind of nice. I'm curious, do your children speak Spanish already?
I'd say 2 of them are fluent now, and one actually in 4 months was completely fluent and was put in normal Spanish education and is doing fine. The eldest, she's a bit behind, but she's pretty much there. Actually, we got marks for this first quarter, and she had an excellent in Spanish. So I think she's also getting there. They are also learning Catalan, actually, these 2, and it's not as fluent there, but it's interesting to see how quickly they can pick this up. The last
and there are some similarities to French, right?
I would actually look at it's so interesting. I find Catalan, if I'm honest, because Catalan seems to be a state in the evolution of Latin language, probably what is called sometimes Oc language from the south of France and stuff, where it one branch went to Spanish, the other branch went to modern French, but then I understand a lot more French and Spanish each time I learn a bit of Catalan. So, but my Catalan is I still need to double down on Spanish before I feel like I can learn yet another language. But I'll definitely
same here.
And the last 3, to be honest, it's so interesting because we don't really know what they speak, and we don't even know in what language they think. My second daughter, she thinks in English, and I think she can understand the 3 languages: French, English, and Spanish. But she would speak in English, and actually each time we try to say, look, we're a French family, we want to speak French, we realize at times she just flip us into English. We don't realize, we're like, oh, shit, I'm speaking English, would you give it to me? The last 3, I've seen them for the first time 2 weeks ago arguing in Spanish spontaneously. So I suspect they actually have picked up, but they're in a school that does the 3 languages, like Spanish, English, and a bit of Catalan. So I think they'll just pick up the 3 naturally.
Cool. And out of curiosity, also not in our agenda, but what is some of the fictions, or if you could mention, what are you reading at the moment? Because I'm reading a book called Clara and the Sun, which is from a Japanese author, and it's really interesting because it's a book that is everything from the perspective of an artificial intelligent friend who is bought to be the friend of a girl in a family. And it's been super nice, the experience of reading this kind of fiction. What are you reading?
So I've just finished a book. So you'd be surprised, but not only it's been 10 years without reading much fiction, but also the reason why I'm going back to fiction is not just for the imagination, it's also for me to cultivate my French. Because after all these years, actually, I used to feel that I was reasonably eloquent and, that my French could be nice, but it's definitely not the case anymore. As much as I don't feel even my English and yet alone my Spanish is good enough, I think I've lost also in my French, so I feel I'm nowhere now right now. So I'm reading a book that's, I can't actually remember the author, but it's called in French it says Le Bal des Folles, it's the ball of the crazy ladies or something like this. And it's also, I find that the best fiction I can read actually is based on historical background. So here the story is so nice.
Yeah.
and it's something, a topic that's close to my heart. It's in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and it's about a place in France, in Paris, an hospital called La Salpêtrière, where I was born, actually. So it also has some kind of interesting vibes to my own story.
Yeah.
Where, you know, it was an interesting time, the late 19th century, because on one side, you know, the French Revolution was already 1 century old, so there was all this enlightenment going on, and we were trusting science more, but also the Industrial Revolution was really strong. So we felt like powerful. But on the other side, what was happening in this hospital, and I know a similar story happened in the UK as well. We were actually kind of putting women that we felt weren't completely right. And they were studied by a doctor called Dr. Charcot. And some of them had real like medical symptoms, but some of them were a bit like, you know, witchcraft a few centuries even before. Like each time a woman didn't fit the social standard, she would be deemed as dangerous and crazy, and we would like kill her or put her in some kind of and unfortunately that happened as well in this time and part of France. And so it's a story of a young woman who, you know, she wants to be free. Like she's a free thinker. She's very clever as well. She's really well read. She's from French bourgeoisie. And at some point, but there is also something a bit supernatural in this story. Like she sees, like she has visions of dead people, and she sees a great grandfather, and you know, so there is this combination.
Super interesting. I want you to write me the name of the book afterwards, so I can read it as well, because it feels super interesting. And you were reading in French to keep up with your French. This is something I do as well. Okay. I read in English, I read in Spanish, and I also read in Portuguese, so I can stay up to date with my language. Yeah, that's really cool. The next question I have for you, Hubert, is if you could tell us about an achievement you are proud of. Could be a recent one, an older one, whatever you think fits for the podcast.
It's that question actually. My best achievement, I think, is to have married my wife and to have built this crazy family together. Professionally, actually, there is one story I like to tell. I'm proud because it's a story of a failure, but that turned into, at least for me, it was a big success. Maybe from the outside, a bit less so. But so it's a story of, you know, when I worked at Sky, I was leading a big team of 200 and something engineers doing really two topics. So Sky is, you could say, is a cable provider in the UK. I mean, it's not exactly cable, but they do satellite TV, but they also have a lot of brands, including one that it's kind of a Netflix-like proposition called Now TV. And my platform was content and discovery, but also data for all these brands. And so effectively, you know, when you fire up your set-top box or you open the app, like the first screen is actually already showing some content on, you know, kind of shelves, again, the Netflix experience that we all know now. Which were all coming from my platform, right? And one thing the reason why we started bringing data into this space is because content recommendation is a very big deal, actually. Like you open the app or you open the screen and you really want to see first, like, what you want to watch. But once I started building these recommenders, and yes, I had therefore a ton of data to be able to make these decisions, there was a time where the CTO of Sky told me, look, now you need to build a data platform for the business. So it's great, you can recommend to the customers, but now all the division in the company, they need to get much better insight. We have founded this big project with the BI department for the last 3 years, but we got nothing out of it. It was a 7 million investment. So now I need you to take this project and do something in the next 11 months, because there's the Olympic Games and we want to be real time with our data back by then, etc. And there are a lot of big companies that work like this. You know, there is a big announcement that made even to the market, to the investors and whatever, and that next year we'll have this and this and that. And then you turn to the tech guys, you and me, and say like, well, Now there is a hard deadline, you need to make it happen. And so I'll try to keep it short, but really I had 800 feeds I needed to migrate onto a new data architecture that my team had figured. And we had 11 months to do it. And initially, partly because an RTV brand was really excited about this project, they really were expecting a lot from their data, and they couldn't really get that for a while. So they came really close to my team. They were like, "We're going to do it super agile. Don't worry about like the 800 field. Maybe we don't even need all of them." I like this vibe, and I put my best like agile people to really blend with them and work with them. But what happened is, after 3 months, again, on a very hard deadline of 11 months, we were going nowhere, because actually the sheer size of the number of use cases, the number of feed, and like it was just too hard to get a holistic view and to be able to prioritize, etc. And so after 3 months, I realized I'm going nowhere. The question I was getting every week was, out of the 800 feed, how many have you migrated, right? It was 0 or 1 after 3 months. So, and I got a really big distress at that time. First, maybe only time where for me to wake up and go to work was, and I didn't get any support from my management either. I felt really alone. But then I realized, I didn't approach this problem the proper way. I'm an engineer. I need to, Agile has its place, but Agile maybe sometimes when there is sheer amount of complexity and it's very repetitive, 800 feeds, like you need to accept it's not an Agile problem, it's an industrial problem. And I took one of my best principal engineer and I said to him, look, I think we need to make this 800 number completely irrelevant. We need to build a machine that will allow us to automate the process of analyzing and long story short, we turned it around and we delivered on time, actually ahead of time, believe it or not, because what we had is effectively an ingestion factory, which would take YAML files or very simple files to describe the feed and to describe also why it fit into the data model that part of the work had been done. And what's interesting at Sky is you don't have a resource or budget problem. You always have a time problem, right? Actually, the trouble I had at Sky is people wanted to give me so much budget, there was no way for me to spend it and deliver at this, because you want the time it takes to hire, and so at some point, this guy Jose, the principal engineer, turned to me and said, "Look, that's it. We're ready. Like we know we have a very good machine now." It took him like 2 months and a half to build that, and then I hired 50 data analysts. With a partner, we had most of the data analysts were in India. We trained them for 1 week, and then we were doing like 60 feed a day or something like this. But it's interesting because I got quite a few lessons from it. Again, Agile is great, but it's not a silver bullet. It takes a lot to accept you're failing, but pivoting is also a very strong muscle you need to keep strong as a leader. And also the fact that data is also super hard, because what's interesting as well, it's not just you have 800 feeds. All these feeds, they are effectively representing the whole company. Every part of the company is working on something, so the feed is changing, and so you don't coordinate 800 part of the company. You also deal with their change management across the board. So the amount of complexity is huge. So data is hard, is really one of the last learning. But the fact that, I really thought I was going right into a wall, that there was no escape, and that in 6 months instead of 11, we could turn it around with a great team, because really it's a story of a team that comes together and realize we need to think harder. We need to be better than this, right? And I was really humbled by the whole process, to be honest with you. And that, for me, is why it's one of the achievements I'm the most proud of, because it's a team achievement. And I wasn't good enough for overcoming it, but as a team and the team I had built around me, yes, we could.
That is a really nice story, and it's actually a success story. It was a failure until you realized you had to change things, and then you did, and you succeeded. So congrats on that as well. There is one question that was asked to me in this podcast by my co-hosts, which I'm going to ask you now, which I'm super curious to hear about. If you could have dinner with 3 influential people, who would they be, Hubert?
Okay, so the first one, it would be, which I don't think it's very original, but I confess I'm fascinated by this person, which is Elon Musk, because I would love to kind of, I don't even understand how, like, yeah, I don't understand if he's a total genius or just a normal guy that's very ballsy and is happy to to go big on any bet that he thinks is going to work out. But also, I don't understand even the attitude, if I'm honest. So I would love to be able to ask quite a few questions to this man. He also has an interesting take on family, because he has probably as many children as I have, but the family configuration is completely different. So I would love to explore that as well with Elon. So that's one. Another one, completely different, but would be the Pope Francis. I also think he's a very interesting man. He has ventured with the whole church into domain that weren't really before, like sustainability and environment. But I also think that we live in a world that's more and more secular, and I would love to understand where I see him trying to influence, for instance, the war in Ukraine and now in the Middle East. But I just wonder, like, what's the role of the church and of the Pope in the modern world. And I think also we live in a world where everyone agrees morality is very important, but we may not have the same references anymore. Like, there is less. Maybe we need to reinvent some foundations here. I don't know. And I'd love to understand what he would say to that. The last person, maybe surprisingly, is Alan Kay. For me, Alan Kay is one of the founders of the modern life and the digital world, and he coined the term personal computing. So in the 60s, he was in Palo Alto working for Xerox PARC, where a ton of innovation happened. Actually, once at Amazon, I took the challenge of, I presented Smalltalk, which he invented with his team in Xerox PARC at that time. Smalltalk is a programming language that was initially designed for helping children and education to, make of the computer a space to learn, experiment, and really augment humans' reach. And it wasn't just a technical endeavor. Like, it was influenced by philosophers and Seymour Papert and even Jean-Philippe Piaget, who I think is he was studying kids and developments of human beings and educational system to support that, etc. So it was a very profound, I would say, even time. But he was really a huge visionary. Actually, he also the man who coined this very famous quote, which is like, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that's exactly what he did. But then in Uppsala, which used to be at least a big conference on object-oriented programming, which Smalltalk kind of invented as well, he made a very big speech, I think it was in the early 80s, 84 or something, whose title is "The Computer Revolution Hasn't Happened Yet," right? And I mean, there is a ton of things I could tell you, but long story short, I'd like to sit down with Alan and say, look, Alan, now we have this ChatGPT LLM going. Seems like a good revolution in the happening to me. Is it the computer revolution you were trying to foster with Smalltalk and a lot of the work you've been doing? That's what I'd love to put to.
I love you mentioned him. One of the first, the company I worked before moving to Europe, they are big fans of him, and they create T-shirts with this exact same quote that you mentioned. So really cool. Since this is,
a T-shirt. Sorry to interrupt you, but at Typeform we used to have a T-shirt as well that was part of the goodies we got as new joiners, right? And mine was actually another quote by Alan Kay, but he has a ton of them, which was, what we call technology is everything that was invented after you were born. Because it's true. Like, you're a bit younger than me, so what I call technology, you probably wouldn't call it technology. Like you were born with technology that were around. Like, for instance, the internet for me is technology, but for a lot of people it's like, no, it's just part of life. It's so interesting that there is a generational effect to technology.
Yeah. That's really cool. So, since this is Tech and Accent podcast, I wanted to hear if you have any embarrassing language or accent related moments that you could share with us.
Yes, I mean, there is it still happens every day. So the probably the most painful moment was when I started at Amazon. Because if I'm honest, there is really a point at Amazon where I felt like, why did they hire me? Because language barrier. I thought my English was okay, but when I started the job, I realized actually it's not good enough for two reasons. First, understanding was hard, but also it made it really apparent to me that leadership requires clarity of communication, and I couldn't articulate my thinking in a the fidelity of what I had here and what's coming out of my mouth was not there, right? And so as I remember a 2-hour call at Amazon in my first 2 months. Half of the people speaking were also from Texas, so we speak about non-native speaker accents. But there is also a big concept of native speakers accent as well that makes
for sure. In the same country, many different accents, for sure.
The same way, actually, at Sky, when I was collaborating with the Scottish, there is a big part of the team that's in Scotland. It took me a while. Once you get into the swing of the accent, it's actually like, I actually loved it. But initially, when I had to talk to, and that time we were with, so half of the call was with people from Texas. And I kid you not, we hang up, and I just had no clue what we talked about. And I also was quite convinced that we agreed on action item on me to follow up on. And I was really thinking, okay, now I need to decide if I should ask my boss, who was on the call, what exactly did we talk about? But also, I'm on probation period, and if you have your latest hire that's been on 2-hour call, got nothing out of it, and now it's just making it clear to you that he doesn't get it. What do you do, right? So in the end,
wasn't it recorded so you could rewatch it?
No, back then recording wasn't that, so I really remember spending 30 minutes at my desk with the pros and cons like matrix to make this decision: should I ask my boss or not? And in the end, I didn't actually, which I don't know. I don't think I would do it again. Like now, I would embrace my weakness a lot more. But back then I wasn't too sure how to deal with that. So that was one. But just to tell you something else, like last month. At Verif, they wanted to do a small video with me, and a bit like we're doing now. There was a question and answer thing, and she asked me something like, "Tell me about something that's really important to you," and I said, "Friends," but she understood French, and and then she started. The whole conversation was around the fact that for me it was really important to be French, which, if I'm honest, I'm sure it is in a way, but it wasn't at all the thing I wanted to talk about. But just I had to go with it because we were live, and so I was like, all right, this makes no sense, but let's follow on. And but it's just this again, this accent. When I say friends or friend, it's too close, and people get confused. And no, here you go.
That's a funny one. Hubert, you mentioned a little bit about like that technology might be something for a person and something else for someone else. How do you see the technology industry in 5 years from now, if you could predict a few things? Or at least what you would want to happen in 5 years from now in the tech industry?
Yeah, it's very interesting, this question. I have to say, I find that actually this 5-year horizon now is almost too far. I think it's clear that we will all have, the same way actually Alan Kay predicted that everyone would have a personal computer in 40 years because he was in the 60s, and he was talking, actually he was really accurate because he predicted it was in the 90s, and he predicted that was one computer per person, like active person. I think we will all have an assistant, so to speak, that will be kind of pre-processing, like some kind of pre-processing platform, so that we don't need to read the news, and this thing will actually notify us when there is something of interest. And but I actually hope that it won't be too much like this, because the other thing that's interesting is maybe this is my wishful thinking speaking now, but I think we have a life that's very digitalized now. I don't think it has massively helped with the depth of relationship between people. And so now if suddenly we have this kind of extra brain that's pre-processing information for us, and we just have great conversation with this thing because it understands us so well and really understands where we want to go, etc., I feel it will actually sever even more the relationship, not just to people, actually, the relationship to reality as well, right? Which we know social networks haven't necessarily helped us to be.
It's everyone in digital world and not in the real one anymore, it seems, right?
And in the end, this relationship to reality, I think, will really be a challenge. And working at Verif, I also know more than many that now with a picture, with even a sound, we can imitate and be better than reality, right? So I think overall the digital life will become more and more like, how can I trust it? Like, where is it coming from? And so I also hope that actually maybe in the next 5 years we'll start see not a withdrawal from technology, but again a need to nurture a concept of reality that's a bit more tangible and maybe less virtual.
Technology will always be part of our life, but make better use of it and still be in the real world with real relationships and not just online, right?
Exactly. And so one question that maybe is worth asking as well is, right now what's really driving technology is it's kind of making money, so to speak, right? But I don't know, maybe I'm dreaming, but I wonder if actually, we've seen OpenAI initially was meant to be a non-profit, so now it's a bit more convoluted, but it just seems that it was one of the first attempts to kind of accept that technology will need new drivers, because on one side it can solve problems that may not, I think if you look at the world, and that's my engineering mindset now speaking, but we have tons of problems to solve. There are the problems that you can make money with, but there are also categories of problems. Now we have the power to solve them, but they may not be like really focused on making money. And I think first it will be interesting to focus on them because it can do a lot of good. But also, I also think that suddenly, like we were talking about the morality and the Pope, like suddenly the morality of technology is only applied to solve problems and make money. Like, it doesn't look like it will. I mean, it will create new types of problems. For instance, correlating your salary to the amount of value you produce. Maybe like now the machine is doing so much of the work anyway. It's not really you producing value, it's the machine. And so, I think will just be really interesting. But I just feel like this unique driver of technology for making money, I think will have to be nuanced. It will still be there for sure. But I think we need to bring new actors and a new configuration for technology to be a different level and used in a different way. Now I have to say I have no idea what shape it will take, but I can see that, for instance, the government, the education system, I think they look at technology as well in a different way. I think also that concept like mental health, etc., that I think that's where it will be really interesting. Maybe technology can support better mental health, but that's also what we were saying before. Like, we need to bring people into a simpler, more tangible concept of reality, like walking in a forest or something. So we'll see. But I'm actually quite excited. I'm not buying into any catastrophism around Gen AI taking over humanity, etc. I think we need to be diligent. I think there is a concept of even wisdom that needs to come around. Again, that's part of what we were saying before. Like, it's not just technology for making money. But actually, I think it's really cool to be at this time of, I guess, mankind, and to see that technology now is so powerful that we need to review how we even harness it. I'm really looking forward to see what we do here.
I love your perspective of looking into technology not only for making money but for other aspects of our life as well. Hubert, it's been a pleasure to speak with you, but we are reaching the end of this episode of the Tech and Accent podcast, and I would like to know if you have any questions for me.
Oh yes. Well, is it first? Like, I'm still intrigued by the concept of the podcast. So, what's your vision for the good you can make through this podcast?
Yeah, so I think that the main idea of the podcast is me and my partner in the podcast, Alekson. We are both Brazilians. We are non-native English speakers, but we have made a career abroad. He lives in Canada. I live here in Spain, and I lived also in the Netherlands and in Norway before that. And in Brazil, we are seen sometimes as influential people who moved from our country, and many people want to follow our path because they want to have this experience of living abroad as well. Sometimes they have all the talent, the soft skills, they have the tech skills, the hard skills, but and they do have the English as well, but they don't feel that confident. They think your English has to be perfect. You should not bring your own accent into the table, and that is a lie. That doesn't work like that. When I remember when I arrived in Europe in 2016, if I look back, if I hear back my accent or my English at that moment, and I see how much I evolved, it's great, but I had the courage to make this move, And I think the main purpose of this podcast is to help people that are in this journey to, let it go. It doesn't need to have a perfect English. You will make mistakes. As far as you can understand what others are saying and you can make you understandable as well, you will succeed. And also bring people who work in the tech industry to share their stories as you are sharing yours with us.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, by the way. I think it's really true, your message, that it's not about perfection. Actually, at some point I was trying to perfect my accent, and then I decided, no, it's a mistake. My accent is helping me a lot. Sometimes it clearly trips me, as I shared with you, but I don't know, there is, it's part of me, right? And you shouldn't try to fit your personality into something you're not. The last question from me is, like, any actually book you would recommend for me that you think would, apparently if it's a fiction book, that I could enjoy?
Yeah, so the one that I am reading at the moment is really cool. It's from Kazuo Ishiguro, and it's called Clara and the Sun, which is the one of the artificial intelligent friend. But there is another trilogy that I read this year from Carlos Ruiz Zafón, who is a Catalan author, and he died, I think, in 2019. But he has a trilogy which is something of the Niebla. I don't remember exactly. I can send you afterwards the name, but it's
please.
It's really nice book, and it's I got it. I borrowed it from my sister-in-law one day, and I just, when you read a book in a week because it's so good and you feel so fascinated, and then I discovered that they were 3 books, and it's kind of a different kind of trilogy because it's not a story, like it's not book 1 and then book 2 is the same story. It's like there is something in the 3 books that happen that are the same, which is the Niebla. How do I say it's in English? Let me translate it. The fog. There's fog in all the books. There is this fog, and it's a mysterious book. So there are things that happen that are very interesting. But yeah, I'll send you the link to the book.
Okay.
It's really nice, and it was a really nice way for me to practice my reading in Spanish.
Which I need too, so that's fantastic. Thank you so much for the recommendation.
You're welcome. Hubert, do you have any final message for our audience in here?
Yeah, I think the last message would be actually this: like this is about jumping into the void and putting aside our wish for perfection and for knowing what's going to happen next. But it's worth it. And I would have never, if I had known the embarrassing moments and the struggle I would give myself, I would never known I joined Amazon and relocated to the UK. And then it's also because I did these moves that suddenly my professional life took a completely different dimension. And I wasn't great. I was good enough, and being good enough in many ways is actually a great place to be, because you have a lot to grow, but you can also, and I think that's it. It's really the message, like, try to be good enough and then jump into the void, and things will happen and you won't regret it.
Yeah, I searched here, and it's the Mist trilogy, which in Spanish would be La Trilogía de la Niebla.
Perfect.
All right, thank you very much again for spending the time with us here, and thank you also for listening to the podcast, and see you on the next episode.
Ciao.
This podcast was edited by Ralf Carneiro.